The ocean is endless, blue, silent, beautiful. But for millions of Africans forced onto slave ships, the Atlantic Ocean was not beautiful. It was a graveyard. Between the 16th and 19th centuries, an estimated 12.5 million Africans were forced onto ships and transported across the Atlantic in what became known as the Middle Passage, the central leg of the transatlantic slave trade. They did not board willingly. They were captured, marched, chained, separated from families, torn from villages they may never see again. Imagine the shoreline, the last glimpse of home, the sound of waves mixing with cries, confusion, and fear. Many captives did not know where they were being taken. Some may not even have understood that they were leaving their continent. They only knew that everything familiar was gone. And then the ships, massive wooden vessels waiting at the coast. 2 European traders, they were cargo ships. To those forced inside, they were floating prisons. Below deck, space was calculated not for comfort, but for maximum human capacity. Men were often chained together in rows. Women and children were separated. Movement was restricted. Darkness surrounded them for most of the journey. The air below deck was heavy, thick, stale. The constant motion of the sea made everything unstable. The creaking wood, the rolling waves, the groan of the ship itself. There was no silence. Day and night blurred together. Some captives had never seen the ocean before. Now they were surrounded by it. Endless water in every direction. No land, no escape. The atmosphere inside those ships was filled with fear, but also disbelief. How could this be happening? Why? Many were farmers, artisans, parents, teenagers. They had names, languages, songs, memories. On the ships, those identities were ignored. They were treated as cargo, yet even in chains, humanity did not disappear. People spoke softly in their own languages when they could. They tried to comfort one another. Some prayed, some sang, some resisted. Rebellions occurred on some ships, desperate attempts to reclaim control. Many were suppressed, but they remind us that those aboard were not passive. They were human beings fighting for their lives. The journey could last weeks, sometimes months. Time stretched painfully. The body weakens when movement is limited. The mind drifts between fear and exhaustion. Some captives must have wondered if they would ever see sunlight freely again. Others may have held on to hope that this nightmare would somehow end. Imagine the psychological weight. You are surrounded by strangers, yet bound together by shared suffering. You do not speak the same language, but you understand grief. You feel the ship rise and fall with every wave, unsure whether it will carry you to freedom or to something worse. For many, the Atlantic crossing became a space between worlds. Behind them was their homeland. Rich cultures across West and Central Africa with traditions, governance systems, and spiritual practices that had existed for centuries. Ahead of them was the unknown. Plantations. Forced labor. A system designed to erase identity. The Middle Passage was not just a physical journey. It was an attempt to break the human spirit. And yet it failed. Because when those ships finally reached the Americas, the people who stepped onto those shores carried more than trauma. They carried memory, music, language fragments, agricultural knowledge, spiritual beliefs, family traditions. Ships tried to reduce them to numbers, but they remained human. The Atlantic Ocean holds countless stories. Stories of fear, of separation, of resistance, of survival. Historians estimate that nearly 2 million Africans did not survive the journey across the ocean. Their lives ended at sea, far from home. The water became both pathway and burial ground. And yet, out of this unimaginable suffering, cultures were reborn. Across the Caribbean, Brazil, and North America, African traditions blended and endured. Spirituals, rhythms, foodways, storytelling traditions, these were acts of survival. Every drumbeat, every whispered prayer, every preserved name was resistance. When we talk about the transatlantic slave trade, it is easy to focus on numbers. Millions transported, centuries of trade. Profits calculated, but numbers can numb us. So instead imagine one person, a young man who once worked beside his father. A mother separated from her child. A teenager who had never traveled beyond their village. Imagine their heartbeat in the darkness of the ship. Imagine the uncertainty, the longing. the courage it took simply to endure another day. The Middle Passage was one of the largest forced migrations in human history. It reshaped continents. It built economies, fueled empires. But it did so at the cost of human lives and human dignity. Today, when we look at the Atlantic Ocean, we see beauty. But beneath its surface lies memory. The journey across that ocean was not just a crossing of water. It was a crossing into a new and brutal world. And yet, from that darkness, generations rose. The pain did not erase humanity. It could not. Because even in the lowest decks of those ships, in the heaviest air and the most uncertain nights, they were still people. They were still fathers, daughters, brothers, mothers. They were still human. And their story deserves to be remembered not as cargo, but as lives.